Hello and welcome to episode 1A of Mjolnir, the miniseries. I'll say hello to Neil and James as usual.
Hello.
And I'm David Yorkshire. And this week, and for the coming few episodes, you may have gathered, there's a bit of a change to the regular format as we're going to look at a miniseries, which is why it's called Mjolnir, the miniseries. There we go now. And this particular miniseries is one that I remember vividly, but my co-hosts had never heard of, called G.B.H, which was written by a very famous writer in Britain called Alan Bleasdale, who's famous for works like Jake's Progress and Boys from the Black Stuff. But this particular miniseries, G.B.H, seems to have been pushed down the memory hole, which at first seems quite odd because it's got some big TV stars in it, like Michael Palin, of course, of Monty Python fame. Robert Lindsay, who has been in My Family, Hornblower and Citizen Smith. Julie Walters, who was in the Harry Potter films, and she also won a Golden Globe, if you remember, for Educating Rita back in the 1980s. And Andrew Schofield, who played Johnny Rotten in Sid and Nancy, if you watched that film. Very famous film by Alex Cox. The music as well, it was composed by Elvis Costello. So again, a very big name in music. And the series is about leftist politics in Britain from a leftist and an extreme leftist perspective, because Bleasdale and pretty much everyone on board are raging leftists, really. I know that Elvis Costello in particular, he used to be part of the organization of Rock Against Fascism concerts back in the 1980s. So it seems bizarre that this series, which was a big event as I remember, when it came out in 1991, apparently it got average viewing figures of 6 million. There's that figure again. It's amazing how often that comes up, isn't it, in conversation?
It was also released on the 6th of June.
Was it indeed? Well,
yeah.
My word, that is extraordinary. I didn't know that. That's.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
So that's 360s,
Yeah.
is it?
Oh no.
Oh, like all the gematria and
also-
numerology people can post about that one.
They're going crazy right now.
It's also the anniversary of D-Day, of course, as well.
Oh.
But this, but this series, it's never been repeated, and it's bloody difficult to watch as well, to actually get a copy of it. It's not on YouTube, it's not on Daily Motion or Putlocker or anything like that. You can get it on the Channel 4 website itself, but it's really sort of obscure, and it's been thrown down the memory hole, really. And it's not talked about either. In fact, we're probably the first people to review it. And so I think that we'll be breaking a bit of new ground here.
I think you got a point there, because if you really think about it, if you go online and go back and look at any TV show from any point in TV history, you can find something on some download site or torrent site or streaming site. You can't find any of them that are showing this. You have to go to Channel 4 and sign up to it. It's really strange how no one's even bothered to rip it off the Channel 4 website and stream it.
Yeah, I can even
It's
find.
almost like vanished from the internet other than Channel 4.
Yeah, I can find obscure stuff that's like, do you know, you get the host sometimes that would talk about a film upcoming. They would have a sort of wee show showing, and you get that. It's of course the same with the kids' cartoons, you know, on the Saturday. I've seen people on YouTube hosting that, minus the copyright content, but they're showing the host and the jokes and talking to the crowd or the cameraman. That is on YouTube. You can find that, but you can't find this. You can't find it on streaming sites or anything. You've got to go to the Channel 4 site. But it's hardly talked about or advertised at all.
That's right. In fact, you two, when I mentioned it, you'd never even heard of it. Of course, you're younger than I am. This came out when I was a sixth former, so you'd have been sort of primary school at that time.
I'll tell you what, I'm the same age as the wee girl in it. Remember, who's is a love interest when he's younger. She's the same age as me, so I would have been the same age as the kids in the first, well, in the flashback sequences, I should say.
Right. Oh, you mean at the time that it was released?
Yeah. So I even seen one kid in the school with a bag that I had, the exact same rucksack. I had that bag, and it worked out. I would have been the same age. It's kind of weird looking back on it. It was very nostalgic for me. because the world was completely different to me back then. But when you watch something that happened in your lifetime that you weren't really old enough to be aware about, it's quite enlightening.
You'd be far too young to understand a series like this.
Yeah, well, this obviously, I was late teens, and so this made quite an impression on me, and so I remember it pretty vividly. And it seems very odd to me that this big televisual event has really been shoved away and pushed underground, it seems. We're going to get on to some of the reasons why it may have been buried as we go on. To organize this, because there's a lot to get through. Now, it's a 7-part miniseries, so what I thought we'd do is we'd have an overview of the whole thing today in this particular podcast, and then look at the first episode as well. And then in the next 3 podcasts, we'll do 2 episodes per podcast, because they are quite long episodes, about an hour and 20, an hour and a half each, I think, aren't they?
It's a film length per episode, really.
That's right, yeah. And then at the end of the last podcast, we'll have a little roundup. So to start us off today, I think we'd better start with an overview of the plot, because a lot of people won't have even heard of this. And we'll look at some of the main characters. And again, as I say, why this miniseries has been hidden away. So who'd like to start with the plot? Because as I say, I doubt people have seen this. So I recommend that people watch it. And there will be spoilers from here on in. Who'd like to go with it?
Oh, bloody hell. It's quite a series to cover. The situation alone, probably hard for people to, especially outside Britain, to understand. Because you've got a lot of... This is made for a British audience and people who would have known British politics of the day. It's very clued in to that era.
Yeah, it's not like a fantasy show like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or anything like that. It is a fictional story about real life events, which I think you really have to be around at the time in the UK to really fully appreciate. And I think it would be very hard for someone outside of the UK to really get to grips with that. This is about real people, a fictional story about real life events and real people.
Although there's obviously a lot in this that applies any place you are, because a lot of it is about politics and human nature. So it applies everywhere.
Yeah, that's true. We'll start with the characters then. Maybe that's best. We'll start with Michael Murray, who's the main character. There are 2 main characters, really. One is the character of Michael Murray, played by Robert Lindsay, and the other character is Jim Nelson, who's played by Michael Palin. Michael Murray is actually based on a real-life politician called Derek Hatton, who was the deputy leader of the Labour Party Liverpool City Council. And he was a member of the Militant Tendency, which was a Trotskyite revolutionary group within the Labour Party who were trying to take the Labour Party over. So really an extreme leftist group trying to push out the rest of the more moderates within the Labour Party.
And if you watch this series, you really would not want anybody to say that Michael Murray was based on your character. That is not a positive thing.
No, in fact, Derek Hatton, he actually made a complaint to Channel 4 about the series because it really was a thinly veiled caricature of, well, to an extent it's a caricature, but it's also a very well-rounded character, I think, in its own right. But certainly there were elements of it that were very much modelled on Derek Hatton, and he went on a show called Right to Reply afterwards, where he had a discussion with the deputy head of the, I think it was the entertainment wing of Channel 4 or the drama wing or something like that. And this guy from the drama wing of Channel 4 tried to convince him that it wasn't really based on him, when Alan Bleasdale had actually been open about it being based on him. So it was very funny. And in fact, when Derek Hatton saw Alan Bleasdale and he realised he was making something that was about him, he said to him, as wound his window down of the car and said, "Just make sure the actor you get is good looking." That's and that is sort of typical of the character we have in this miniseries of Michael Murray.
Yeah, you could imagine Michael Murray saying that exact same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. So it was very true to life. Now, you have the fortunes of these two characters, Michael Murray. What about his antagonist, if you like, or protagonist, and Michael Murray is the antagonist, his counterpart at least anyway, Jim Nelson. What about his character?
It's an interesting character because he's this guy who he's a nice guy. He's a just an everyday nice guy, a nice, well-to-do school teacher, but he's also quite staunch in his conviction. He's able to stand up and make these amazing stances against this crowd of people who've gathered outside of his school in protest. And he takes a stance against them. And he's very strong and brave, but at the same time, he's very weak. He's a hypochondriac. He's always going to his doctor because he thinks he's dying. He's emotionally unstable and he has these panic attacks. So despite this bravery that he has, he's also very weak about himself, really.
Yeah, he's someone who actually finds normal life quite difficult to deal with, but yet
Yeah.
when the pressure's put on him, he actually responds well to that, to emergencies and difficult situations and so on. So he's kind of the opposite, if you like, of Michael Murray. Michael Murray likes control. And when things are out of control, he becomes extremely weak.
But when Michael Palin's situation, when things are out of control, he actually gets stronger.
That's right, yeah. So you have the two contrasting characters there. You also have this backstory to the character of Michael Murray throughout this miniseries, don't you? This story of his childhood, which you get in the first episode. And it comes very early into the first episode, actually, doesn't it?
Very disturbing. Straight away, you get these hints of a very disturbing background for him, which is obviously evidenced by the first episode, how he behaves and his reaction. You realise this guy has a lot of baggage and issues.
Yeah, that's
which
right.
means you can't fully dislike him. He's not like a villain in the sense that what people might watch TV shows now and think of, like I said, Game of Thrones and Joffrey and all the evil people. This guy is flawed and he's corrupt and he's a bit of a mean guy, but you can't really outright hate him because it gives you enough storyline to realize this is why he became the way he is, or at least this is evidence of why he became the way he is.
Yeah. So I'll give people a bit of an overview of what the series is about. Basically, Michael Murray, this character played by Robert Lindsay, he comes to power. He becomes the mayor of Liverpool, or the head of the council, and basically fills the council with his sycophants. He's a man who loves power. He loves control. But above him, there are people who are pulling his strings. They want to create a mini revolution. They want things to be more revolutionary. They want a more sort of extreme left, Antifa driven, well, not really Antifa, I should say, but in the sense of how violent Antifa are. They want to rule by the face and through violence and so on. Michael Murray becomes somewhat of a puppet for this militant tendency because he's quite afraid of them in some ways, because he can see that they're actually stronger than he is. He's also extremely corrupt, and they use his corruption against him, and he's always afraid of that, and he's always afraid of having his past found out. So they've got that power over him, and so he accedes to their wishes and so on. Near the beginning, in this first episode, they staged this strike as a show of strength and tried to bring the city to a standstill, to force out the Conservative government and to put pressure on the MP, who, of course, Michael Murray, we see him in interview with on television during that first episode. That was a common tactic of Labour at the time. One guy, this Jim Nelson, who's a school teacher at a special school, defies the strike. He doesn't break a picket line because there isn't a picket line there, because the guy who becomes in charge of education on the city council forgets to inform this particular school that they're on strike because he's a bit of a drunk. And he's one of Michael Murray's sycophants, and he's a former bin man who's basically not qualified for the job. We see the former head of education get pushed out near the beginning and replaced by this sycophant, don't we, in the town hall?
Yeah.
Yeah, setting the tone for the rest of it, and gives you a great insight into some of the dirtiness of politics in Michael Murray's mind.
Yeah, that's right. What I found quite unsatisfactory about the series was that everyone in the series seemed to be politically aware, and that's just not like real life. This school teacher is also a card-carrying member of the Labour Party, as well as very politically aware and so on.
In real life, you get a lot of people just swept along or just want to live and let live.
Yeah, you're right. Not everybody's up to scratch on the political system of the times and what exactly they're voting for and who their candidates are. Nobody's that knowledgeable, like A or B to most people.
Yeah, this is a significant chunk of people who never even vote. So they're not members of parties, they're not clued up on daily politics from news or anything else.
But it's at the same time, it's not completely disbelievable because it's only a TV show, really, and it had to represent as best they could what people were thinking back then and trying to give everybody's different type of character what they would have done in that situation. So, of course, not everybody's going to be as clued up, but I think they had to do it just for the sake of the TV show.
Maybe it was because you've got a limited time. So if you're going to have a TV character on screen for a certain number of minutes, the writer at Bleasdale would want to get yet another message, political or otherwise, across through that character, so they all end up sounding like they're politically savvy for their views.
That's right. This, I think, reflects on Alan Bleasdale himself in that he's such a political writer that he always brings politics to the fore. Pretty much whatever is written, Boys from the Black Stuff was the same, actually. There's always a very hard political socialist message. Socialist of the new type as well. One of the things that I found was interesting when Michael Murray goes in and he addresses the board of Liverpool Council is that he's very much of that new Labour sort of Blairite kind of mentality in many ways. In other words, some of the older Labour guys there, they talk about looking after our own first when he's talking about building new flats and new houses and so on. And the older guy asks, yeah, but who are you going to put in them? Meaning, of course, ethnic minorities. I think that this is one of the problems for the left with this series in general, in that Michael Murray is always seen as being pro-black, pro-ethnic minority. You know, he says to that older guy, when that older guy says, our people should come first, and he says, they are our people. But you've got a guy who's doing something for ethnic minorities and so on, and positive discrimination, but yet at the same time, he's a very unsympathetic character.
Yeah, he's shown as sleazy, predatory. He's terrible.
Yeah.
Even on the minorities he claims to love, remember? He has one sent to his room, essentially, like he was the lord of the manor.
Yep. Yeah. But remember, they all are. I mean, every one of his entourage, even the people above him, none of them, although they are maybe considered leftists or Labour or whatever you want to call it, they're all scumbags. They're all involved in this big kind of conspiracy to do something devious by pretending to be something else. And making it believable to the public by getting the black guy who's his right-hand man. In the second episode, Michael says he used to feel like a black man growing up, and he connects himself to all these minorities to get their favor. Pretty much what they've always been doing, really.
The use of
appeal to the ethnics and the minorities and pretend to be on their side, and they're fighting for them.
Rally together the edges and the outsiders to attack the majority and bring things down. You see it play out in this exactly the same.
Yep. There's no good in it. There's no morality. There's no just reason for it. It's not like they can stand up and say they're doing it because they really deeply love the ethnic minorities. They're doing it because they want to be in power. That is the end game.
That's the path
to power. Like stepping stones.
Yeah. I think that the character of Michael Murray, though, does genuinely have an affinity with the outside and with the ethnic minority. because he was an outsider. He says that a few times during the miniseries, actually, that he was an outsider. He knows what it's like to be the downtrodden and so on, and the outsider. And this comes, of course, from his backstory in his childhood, that this has sort of shaped him. But actually, if you look at it, that's sort of pretty much a criticism, because Alan Bleasdale's written this character who's become corrupt and bad, really from this incident in childhood, or several incidents in his childhood, that were not really his fault. But yet, without these childhood incidents, he wouldn't have been like that. He wouldn't have taken the part of the other. He wouldn't have identified with the outsider and so on.
He clearly tries to revenge himself on essentially everybody through this whole process. That's a lot of his motivation. You get that feeling that he's got this glee for revenge straight away in the first episode by harassing and tormenting the headmaster. Very petty, pathetic to come back years later over these issues, but that's the kind of man he is. Obviously, there's also the motivation of covering up his past, but it gives a great insight into his character, this sense of revenge. Now it's my turn, obsessing about some slight in his childhood and so on. He's never actually grown up and beyond it. And what's fantastic is it's a leftist Bleasdale writing a leftist character as this. You know, this is the people who are sympathetic and pushing the minorities above the natives. And this is the kind of character he gives them.
That's right. In fact, on that right to reply on Channel 4, there were a lot of people wrote in who were from the extreme left, who basically said that Alan Bleasdale had betrayed the left. And so, his own side had turned against him, even though it's very much, as we're going to find out later, very much a leftist miniseries. But it really shows why this was buried by Channel 4. I mean, Channel 4 from its beginning had an extreme leftist slant as a channel.
Yeah, and don't think that maybe when we say leftist and describe this movie about leftists, that it's an inherently leftist TV show, because it's not. You can sit back and watch it quite happily, even if you're on our side. It won't fill your head full of absolute nonsense that will, I don't know, get inside you and manipulate you. You can really watch this and enjoy it from an outside perspective and see how the left almost rips itself apart.
Bleasdale, his mistake from the left's point of view was that he was honest enough to put a somewhat true mirror up to what was going on.
Yeah, it wasn't like absolute leftist nonsense. It was very well written.
Yeah, it is. Some of the writing is extremely good, and Bleasdale is a very good writer. One of the last very good leftist writers, as it happens. If you look at how the left has degenerated because of its current obsession with deconstruction and so on, it has bad writers and bad artists.
And as we covered in the last podcast, he writes quite complicated round characters, which you tend not to see much now, if at all. These black and white characters are an inch deep.
Yeah, absolutely. There is an element of caricature to the characters in an almost Dickensian way. But I think that this is fine because it adds element of humor to the miniseries. The miniseries does have quite a lot of humor to it, actually. Very black humor, but humor nonetheless.
Oh, there's some great laugh out loud moments where you really do find yourself laughing at some of the things that's in it, especially in the third or fourth episode, when he has the nervous breakdown on the roadside and he's like chewing into the grass. And I've had moments in my life where I've just been like that, where you really just want to bury your head in the ground, and he's literally trying to do that. And it's a hilarious scene. Yeah.
That's right. And then the bus driver turns up and mistakes him for a popular actor at the time.
Yeah, a whole bustle. You just turn up and see it. Like the last thing you'd want to see.
Yeah. Coming on to this idea of revenge, that is one of his main motivations, of course, is revenge. And it gets foregrounded, as you've said, early on. He has a complex. This is really, I think, what incenses him about the character of Jim Nelson in that he also is a school teacher, is a head of this particular school for special children. And I think that that is equally what antagonizes him. You have that scene, and it's rather an excellent scene in the beginning where Jim Nelson, he's still teaching these special children, even though he's not meant to, even though it's meant to be a day of strike. And of course, all the thugs, the leftist thugs, gather outside, and Michael Murray walks into the school and confronts Jim Nelson. But you get that point just before he goes into the headmaster's door when he has a flashback to his own childhood. It's a brilliant little, very easy trick with the camera where you have the close-up on Michael Murray's face as an adult, and then you go to the door, it flicks to the door with the word headmaster on it, and the perspective changes so that the camera comes down and you're looking up at it all of a sudden. And then it goes back to Michael Murray as a young boy, as he would have been looking up at the door that said headmaster on it, because the difference in height, of course. And I think that was really well done. And it showed very easily and very visually the complexes that Michael Murray as an adult has.
It shows good storytelling that can be done today without needing to worry about tricks. These are all clever and they're well used, but it's not beyond anybody's means as long as they've got the intelligence and talent to do it.
That's right. In fact, Bleasdale had, one might say, an overweening authority on the direction of the miniseries. He was actually on the set pretty much all the time.
Unusual for a
almost
writer
as
to
an
have...
extra director.
Yeah, it's unusual for a writer to have that kind of control.
That's right. But Bleasdale, of course, was so well regarded that he got that level of control. And I think that it was a good level of control, actually, because the miniseries has turned out well.
Yeah, it's about as good as I'd imagine we could hope for. Especially when there's some golden lines that obviously cut as Bleasdale is off the left. You kind of wonder why he would put some of these lines in, like through the Michael Murray character, he talks about how there's no jobs, no opportunities, etc. for these minorities, and he makes out that this is a problem, when my reaction is, well, why are they there then? If there's no jobs for them, why are you bringing them in? but that obviously never comes up because it's Bleasdale writing it, but it is the question the viewer should be thinking, why are they there then? Why did you bring them in if there's nothing for them?
Yeah, that's right. One of the other themes, as well as revenge, we've got the idea of bullying. It's interesting that, of course, the scene, one of the early scenes with the strike, it takes place in a school, bringing back Michael Murray's own school days into the present. You have this reverse bullying. In other words, Michael Murray was bullied and he's become the bully. Yeah. I think that's also extremely interesting. And he's got his gang outside of pickets. This scene actually is an incredibly powerful scene of what a picket line is like in some situations. Anyway, some picket lines are quite stable and quite amicable. Other picket lines can be extremely vicious and violent. And this is one of the latter. And this was probably the first time that a picket line was played in this way. And again, you can see why the left criticized him for that.
Yeah. Especially as they are shown as quite sadistic. Remember that this is a school for special kids with mental problems.
That's right. And you got them scaring the children,
banging the windows and the roof, terrifying these poor kids.
That's right, yeah.
And they know it and they're laughing about it. This is the thing, it's a deliberate attempt to frighten the kids.
But equally, I also see this as Alan Bleasdale going over towards the new left. These are, don't forget, they're all white working class people who are portrayed here. Whereas later in the series, when we look at the ethnic minorities there and the riots and the gangs and so on, they are treated with far more sympathy. For me, one of the reasons I think that this miniseries is buried is because you can see the betrayal of the white working classes by Labour, and it goes back quite a long way. You've very much got this old left, new left antagonism between the old left of the trade union movement and the old style of councillors. We look after our own, we look after the working class and so on, and the new left mob coming in using ethnic minorities as really a battering ram.
Because you've got a combination of true believers in whatever nonsense left ideas, but you've also got in real control, just as you say, people just cynically stepping on them up the ladder.
Yeah, that's right. I must point out at this point that Alan Bleasdale's wife is called Julia Moses.
So if you ever meet his wife,
we'll leave it at that, shall we? I think there's an inference there, but anyway. So yeah, there's that to it, and also you get equally this snobbery and reverse snobbery that's looked at. I don't know if you looked at that at all. Michael Murray is an interesting character in that he's a reverse snob, but yet equally there is this envy of people of a higher class than he comes from.
That is, certainly in Britain, that's a very common archetype for people who are class climbers. They become very conscious of their own origins, and because of that, they end up hating people who are of that origin or below, while at the same time they want to be above and resent everybody that is actually above them or was born to it.
Do you remember there's a scene, I can't remember what episode it is, where they're all sitting in this truck stop and they're eating this slop of beans, potatoes and hash browns and things like that, and he's munching away. And he says something to the effect of, they eat it because they like it, and he's eating it too. So it kind of shows in many ways that he's just, deep down, he's not high class himself. He's almost pretending to be. And at the end, like deep down, he's just as low class as any of them, I suppose.
That's right.
But he's desperate to be anything but that.
And you see that even with the childhood. That's been with him right from his early childhood memories and scars. This has haunted him.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. You get this in the first episode where he's round at this girl who we went to school with, this Eileen Critchley, at her house. And of course, her father's this High Court judge. And so they live in this well-to-do stately home. And why is he hanging around her exactly? Because she's very abusive towards him. It's a very abusive relationship. And he always wants to please her. This is right from the first episode, it's shown. It's really because he's attracted to that. He's attracted to the glamour and the wealth and the glitz and so on. Yet at the same time, later, he hates the fact that he's attracted to that, but yet simultaneously he strives to attain that.
While fighting for the rights of the lower class ethnics.
That's right. In many ways, he's a man who simultaneously loves and hates his own class. He loves the ethnic minorities who are low and downtrodden, but hates his own. And you get that a lot with these sort of politicians.
And we see in some of the episodes a gradual build-up of why he became the way he is. And I get this feeling from him that he is this guy who was bullied when he was a kid, and some pretty bad, I won't ruin it for anybody who's wanting to watch it, but some bad things happened to him in his childhood. And it's constantly in his mind that he's playing catch-up, and he's attacking anyone in authority who might have some kind of power, because he never quite achieved that when he was a youngster, and he's trying to make up for that constantly. He's even fighting against principles, his own convictions that he would have been for prior to that. Like, why is he going after a teacher who wants the best for special needs kids and bullying him when he himself was bullied by his teacher? He seems to be at war with himself. He doesn't really know where to go.
That's right. And in fact, the people who care for him is often the worst too.
His mother.
And his brother
like
as
his
well.
mother.
His brother as well is really horrible and he constantly belittles him.
That's right, yeah. To explain for the people at home who haven't seen this, he's given his brother a job as his own chauffeur, but constantly belittles and bullies him. And we see this in the first episode as well, where he's practicing a speech that he's going to give, and his brother's got to say that it's really good.
And he makes him, this is like, he explicitly makes him say that just to obviously get one over him.
That's right, yeah.
It's a really horrible way he does it.
Yeah.
There's one overriding thing, though. I think, for me personally, the most traumatic thing for him is, despite the bullying, all the bad things that happened to him in the TV show, I think his major flaw is that he never knew what his dad was like. It seems to eat at him throughout the series. He not knowing what his dad was like. It consumes him, and I think that's the biggest thing for him.
This is quite interesting, actually, because the left love to attack the father figure, and yet in this series we have the problem of not having a father figure.
Shown as a great hole in him that then inspires abuse and terrible behaviour.
Yeah. And the problem is, of course, as we find out during the series, his mother won't tell him what his father was like. So his mother, who's a bit batty, a bit senile, she can offer him no comfort. And this, obviously, all the female figures in his early life have betrayed him and abused him and so on. He becomes quite misogynistic. He has a family. Interestingly, throughout the series, you never see his family. Did you notice that? His own, his own children and wife.
Yeah, you just sort of hear about them.
Yeah, you get one scene where his wife phones his mother, but you never see her. You see everyone. You see everyone else's families and so on, like Jim Nelson's and the brother's family, but you never see his.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because his father was never in his life, and he suffered for it. Now he's never apparently in his kid's life because you never see them. So he's just as bad. And
of course, he's completely unfaithful to his own wife constantly.
Yeah, that's right. Even though he seems to have quite a nice family. So he's really become corrupt and corrupted by his early life. But I think that the corruption was always within him. He often questions why he couldn't have been a good man. Did you notice that? There's often this rhetoric to himself on why he couldn't be a good man.
There's that glimmer of self-awareness that sometimes comes through when everything else is quiet.
Because he's a devious bastard, but he does have some moments of genuine tenderness and so on.
Which comes back to the quality of writing in this. It would have been very easy just to make him a 2D cutout.
That's right. The problem is, of course, that all these leftist characters, they're all fleshed out and so on. But when we come to the Tory characters later, they're not. They really are vicious and evil and 2D.
Bleasdale's personal opinions coming through.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that that's bad writing. But anyway, we'll come on to that in a future episode. What I also found interesting were the characters of the journalists. Although they're peripheral characters and they're quite flat characters, they are characters that carry the plot to an extent. And they are not portrayed sympathetically at all.
And even showing that the two sides are essentially two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. When the two journalists go to the school to get the scoop, and one is obviously from the Sun and the other is obviously from the Mirror. So the allegedly right-wing and left-wing rags, tabloid press in Britain, they are very much friendly to each other. and are really antagonistic towards Jim Nelson.
Giving the game away a bit for people not in the know.
Yeah, nobody's on your side, basically.
That's right. And interestingly, it's that journalist Bubbles from the allegedly right-wing rag, from the Sun or whatever, who informs Michael Murray that Jim Nelson is a strikebreaker. So he's the one who starts the whole ball rolling as regards the plot. What I found as well interesting is how the series was left with Michael Murray at Jim Nelson's house. Did you notice that? That was quite deliberate, I think, when he's there in his mayoral car at Jim Nelson's house watching him. That's a kind of I know where you live. The old threat.
Fear tactic, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know why that's like so much fear into people these days. But it really does, though. If someone was to message you, I don't know, send you a Facebook message or whatever, like, and say, I know where you live, you might think, oh, big deal. Lots of people know where I live. But for some reason, it strikes a chord in people that someone's taking notice of you. And it's a good fear tactic to put in people's minds.
But it's obviously the implied violence behind it. It's a way of threatening somebody and then dodging away from the law when you're pinned down about it.
Absolutely right, yeah. You get a lot of menace and threat, I think, in this first episode. You have the confrontation of Jim Nelson. He's on his own in the gym of the school. Michael Murray's got all his henchmen around him. But there is a little bit of comedy involved in that as well at the same time. That sort of has a bit of relief for the audience. Don't know if you got that.
Yeah,
it's kind of like reminds you of school, doesn't it? Not that I was bullied or anything like that, but when the kids come in, they corner you in the gymnasium or whatever. It had that sort of, it's like the bullies have grown up, and this is what they act like when they're older.
And you also notice that even with his henchmen, he only gets braver when he's in the gym and there's no witnesses.
Yeah,
he gets more blatant with his threats.
And his anxiety and his panic attacks, you would have expected them to kick in then, but they don't. And that's like we've spoken about Robert Lindsay a lot, but I think Michael Palin's acting is really good in this show as well, because he shows that really well. Yeah. He's his usual typical Michael Palin self, where he's trying to be funny, and I'm sure a lot of the stuff was ad-libbed and off-the-cuff performances, but he really does act this role out very well. This man who has crippling anxiety problems, but when it's time to rise up and make a stand, he seems to have this, like he turns into the Incredible Hulk with a sweater on.
Yeah, he does seem to really harden under pressure.
Yeah.
And you see that also reflected with the dead child. Remember with the accident, with the axe? He immediately acts in a very rational manner and rushes off for help when other people might have just panicked in a flap. Yeah.
I've never seen a child being injured like that, but there's a horrific scene in one of the episodes where a child is very badly injured and goes on to die, and he acts like many people wouldn't be able to act in that situation. But he is this man who goes to the doctor. He's a hypochondriac. He's obviously mentally unstable in many ways, but he rises up and he carries this kid off the moorland. It's an incredible performance by him. He's not his typical Monty Python character. He does a very good job acting in this TV show.
Well, what makes him, I think, different is that there's at least something he cares about more than himself, while the Michael Murray is the opposite. Everything else, even if he does care about it, is subject to his advancement in life. While with Jim, you see that he's willing to risk himself. He's willing to put his own fears aside instantly as soon as there's a child in danger or something. That's the sort of the difference between the two, the key difference.
Yeah, that's very much true. In fact, in the interview with Alan Bleasdale, he said that Jim Nelson was pretty much a vision of the character that Alan Bleasdale himself would like to be. He's almost a romanticized vision of himself, kind of like Tom Cruise always plays the parts that he would love to be like in real life.
With built-up
Jim
shoes.
That's right. Yeah. And Jim Nelson is pretty much Alan Bleasdale, a romanticized version of Alan Bleasdale within this miniseries. So he's going to have little foibles and stuff like that, but essentially he's going to be the perfect guy. I think to an extent he's a little too perfect at times.
Because his foibles are sort of across the board. It's not something you could condemn or look down on somebody for. While Michael Murray's are things that would disgust people.
That's right, yeah. You have him as this ideal family man, almost. They have their ups and downs and so on, but nothing really serious. This foible that he has, this tic, this nervousness, this hypochondria and so on, doesn't really affect the family that much, only in a humorous way.
And he's well-respected sort of pillar of the community.
That's right, yeah. And again, he's a heart and soul of the Labour Club, the Labour Party club. And again, you have this politics really foregrounded, whereby, as I say, everyone is politically charged in some way or another. That's, I think, one of the downsides of Bleasdale's writing, is that everyone has to have they have to be ciphers for a certain political point of view.
Couldn't help himself.
No, he couldn't. That's the problem with all highly politicized writers. And in other words, people from the left, because people from the left are intensely political people. See, I would, I'm from the right, the proper right, and the proper right would like to see politics a lot less in everyday life and in art and so.
Ends up turning what could be good art into a slightly shabbier propaganda moment.
Yeah, that's right. You have a lot as well with the family, in that you have his wife, Laura, and she's probably actually the most perfect character in the whole series. She's a bit of a Mary Sue.
She's even the grounding for him when he goes wrong, like the moment with the car. She's there to tell him he was in the wrong.
That's right. She has absolutely no flaws whatsoever, it seems. And a lot of the women doing this, and again in that interview that I saw with Bleasdale, he said very much that he believes in this idea of strong women. He's very feminist, very Marxist feminist kind of guy. So all the women have to be quite idealized. And I think that we have a reification of the family, but yet it seems to be very matriarchal as opposed to patriarchal, which again goes hand in glove with leftist sensibilities. I don't know what you guys thought.
Well, she's shown as the sensible shoulder constantly. When he goes wrong, she's there to pull him back in line. Even when he goes morally wrong, not just that he has some sort of fit or anxiety attack, she's also there, the moral rock. She's there to sort of roll her eyes when he goes wrong. She's also there to guide the family. She is a sort of flawless character, which would be Bleasdale's fault. That is a mistake, considering how he managed to write everybody else so interesting.
Yeah, that's right. It is very much a flaw in his writing. I think that he idealizes this maternal figure far too much, in that everyone else has, everyone has flaws.
And even minor characters in this are written in a very interesting way, with flaws and jealousies and problems. Like the brother of Michael Murray is a relatively minor character, but you actually get a real sense of depth of the relationship quite quickly, which shows
he's probably the most
writing.
real character, isn't he?
Yeah, you really feel for him, and you can. Obviously, that's a credit to the actor as well, but the writing's part of that. That shows that he's capable of giving those three-dimensional characters. But then, as Dave's pointed out, you've got this matriarchal figure who comes in, and she actually is almost hard to remember because she's so flawless. She's more like a cardboard cutout, a stereotype that could come from anywhere, this cookie-cutter character, because she's got no flaws to make her stand out beyond any other flawless character that you could have dropped in. It's not really her. You couldn't really remember her in any way.
And this, of course, has been the problem ever more with leftist writing. We've seen it in particular with the Star Wars as of now, that we have these
There were
Mary
only
Sue
3
characters.
Star Wars films. There were only 3 films made years ago. I refuse to acknowledge anything else.
That's true, yeah. That's true. But the Disney Wars films then. This is the problem. And even with things like the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
The character there, Katniss Everdeen, she again is very much a Mary Sue. And this is why those films are forgettable as well. There's no depth there. This is the problem when you create Mary Sues, in that there's no depth and there's no interest in the character.
Yeah, because nature is, of course, more complicated and deep.
Yeah. Last thoughts on this first episode, then, perhaps on the series in general. I personally think that despite its flaws and despite its politics, it's very well worth seeing. It's extremely interesting because, as I say, a lot of things, as we'll be talking about in future episodes, about how leftist politics shifted are exposed in this miniseries, which I think is one of the reasons why it's been buried. And not just leftist politics, but all the shenanigans that politicians in general get up to. And especially as we'll see when we look at MI5 and what they get up to.
Yeah, this is a time capsule, and that's why people don't like it. Just like 1984, they want to be able to throw things down the memory hole. And oops, here we've got a leftist who has carefully preserved all this stuff for people to see for the rest of the time, which they don't want remembered.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like I said, it's a lot, but in the same way that John Carpenter's They Live, I mean, he's a leftist. It's you could argue it's a leftist movie, but you can watch it and feel that the movie's almost exposing a side that you would have a contempt for and that you're suspicious of. So even though it was written by a leftist, filmed by a leftist, is on Channel 4, maybe the most leftist TV channel of all time, but it has a TV show which shows how corrupt it is. It's almost like it's backfired on them in a way. Maybe that's the reason why you don't see it or hear of it.
Yeah, as I say, shown once only, which is very bizarre.
But then again, it's still on the Channel 4 website. So if they wanted to get rid of it, why is it still available on their website?
Well, they might get rid.
It's hidden everywhere else.
They might get rid of it after we've done our podcast on it.
It could have
Wouldn't
been
that be fantastic?
Somebody might have just put that up there, and it's because somebody's given them an order. All right, we're setting up a 4 on demand, an internet TV on demand. Just put everything up there, and they might have just been dutifully processing all the TV series they've had, thinking, more content, goody goody. So they certainly don't advertise or push it at all when they could. They didn't bother repeating this, broadcasting it or syndicate around the world. This would seem to have been quite a flash in the pan for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, very much so. So if there's nothing further, gentlemen,
I would say to encourage people to watch this, and hopefully they can archive this with their own legal copies and share in legal manner with their friends. Legal copies, sit down and watch it together, etc., because it shouldn't be forgotten, and it is relevant outside of Britain, what you can see in this, because it is about people in politics, which applies everywhere.
Yeah, and as we're going to see in future episodes, it's also about how racial politics and the politics of ethnic minorities comes to the fore, and people don't realize how old this actually is.
Give it a watch. It is worth watching.
Yeah. So we hope that you will join us for the next installment when we unveil more of this mini-series. And so I hope that you will subscribe and join us for our next episode. Bye for now.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.